Welcome everyone, and thank you all for joining. Again, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us. The response for this webinar has been tremendous, and I believe we are over capacity by hundreds of registrations. So I apologize to anyone unable to join us for the live webinar, but we are recording this webinar so it can be viewed later. As well, if we run out of time, any slides that we don't cover will also be made available later as well. My name is Tom Baumann. I am co-founder of the Greenhouse Gas Management Institute. Over the last 10 years, I've been involved with digital innovations to help advance action on climate change. And 2017 is also GHGMI's 10th year anniversary. And it's great that GHGMI has become a global organization with members in over 160 countries. Clearly, blockchain is a very exciting new technology. Blockchain, in combination with other digital technologies, is being applied across many sectors, such as finance, healthcare, government, agriculture, energy, and climate change is no exception as well. My own involvement with blockchain started in early 2015, so about 2.5 years ago, and I've been watching the sector grow ever since. I'm also involved with the Blockchain Research Institute, assessing blockchain for climate. Today, there's probably around 100 blockchain companies and initiatives for climate and sustainability. And so I'll say just a few words about the drivers for and GHGMI's interest with blockchain. Switch sides. So there is definitely an urgency and great scale in tackling the climate challenge in order to achieve the Paris goals. And of course, there's a high degree of complexity in terms of all of the climate actions, particularly the bottom-up approaches and subnational activities as well. Blockchain offers great benefits in combination with other digital technologies like the Internet of Things, big data, artificial intelligence, and the sharing economy, and all this together are tools that already GHG professionals are starting to use, and GHGMI's mission really is to support professionals using the tools in support of environmental integrity and market integrity. So what's clear already is that there's a multitude of different blockchain applications applied to supply chains, renewable power, natural capital, and so on. And they're using an array of different blockchain technologies and protocols necessary for their specific applications. And it's important that as these blockchain applications evolve, that there's some level of interoperability and consistency as they link up towards national registries, nationally determined contributions or NDCs, and other forms of international cooperation such as emissions trading. And so today we have 3 speakers to explain different approaches for using blockchain to address climate change. Firstly, we have Joe Madden, CEO of US-based Xpansiv, who will talk about blockchain's use for differentiating low-carbon commodities and products and utilizing existing markets. Second, we have Stefan Wiesen of the Climate Chain based in Europe, who will talk about blockchain for registries and emissions trading. And then thirdly, we have Chalian of the Energy Blockchain Labs based in China, and he will talk about blockchain applications for renewable power, green finance, and other green assets. Following their presentations, we'll have a Q&A session. Want to thank all of the registered participants on the webinar for submitting questions. I think we have about 50. Unfortunately, we won't be able to get through all of them, but hopefully there'll be some follow-up to this webinar to continue the discussion. So with that brief introduction, I will set up Joe Madden's presentation. One moment, please. Switch that over. Okay, Joe, are you ready to go?
I am. Hi, everyone. And Tom and GHG MI, thanks so much for making this time to talk to folks. It's nice to be able to connect with everyone in a virtual space and reach so many people. So it's fantastic. Just quick background. My background is originally in global supply chain in the sort of early days of the internet, using the internet to facilitate sort of offshore supply chain support and third-party logistics systems. And then following that, I migrated into the startup space and launched one company called AT Dynamics that's a tractor-trailer application, and then moved into environmental commodities with a company called EOS Climate that we launched in the California cap and trade system, which was a relatively unique approach to environmental commodities. It was focused on a unique offset type, which was really production focused as opposed to project based, and led to a lot of insights about scaling emission reductions and so forth, which really became the basis for what is now Xpansiv. And so, Tom, if you can click to the next slide. So Tom asked me to just quickly touch on blockchain as a technology, and I think just at a very, very base level, there's an incredible buzz around blockchain and cryptocurrencies, and almost every day in the news there's something, maybe 10 things happening with coin offerings and various valuations of the cryptocurrencies and all kinds of things that create incredible buzz, but also a lot of confusion. And I think just at a very, very basic level, Bitcoin was the original incarnation of the technology or application of the technology, but the technology itself really at a fundamental level enables peer-to-peer transactions without a centralized party. So it sounds minor, but it's very major. So you can have significant evolutions across multiple human systems that are financial, supply chain, all the things that Tom mentioned. But I think at the base level, if we think of the internet as the dissemination or large-scale global reach for information, blockchain provides the same for value instead of information. So it's effectively the internet of value. And so there's a great deal of attention and focus in and around fintech, so exchanges and settlement mechanisms and cryptocurrencies and so forth. But they're all really centered around transactions. And when we boil it down, carbon transactions are very, very similar to financial transactions. Renewable energy credits or verified emission reductions or ITMOs or any of those instruments are stores of value and therefore can be supported in many different forms by blockchain. So I just wanted to kind of ground us there as we go forward and folks build on that. And if I miss something in that basic overview, maybe the other presenters can pick up where I left off. But very basic grounding there. So Tom, if we go to the next slide. So Xpansiv is a company. We're based in San Francisco and Albuquerque. We are a technology company made up of a very diverse team, from markets and exchanges to information technology and data science to blockchain and even supply chain. And we're really looking at driving and addressing inefficiencies in global commodity markets. And our core innovation is what we call digital feedstock, which is a an asset class for global commodities. It's effectively a digital representation entitled for commodity production. So if you can imagine a digital ton of palm oil, or a digital barrel of oil, or a digital MCF of gas, or a digital bushel of corn, that's what we're talking about. And at a base level, what it allows for is commodity market participants, all commodity market participants, producers, traders, and so forth, as well as downstream market participants, to use existing production data in new ways that they couldn't use them before, to create new forms of value. So if we go to the next slide. And so the reason why we focused on commodities are, there's many reasons, but at the very basic level, they're already assets and they have value. They make up an incredible amount of global GDP, and they really are the interface between natural and sort of human systems with regards to energy and food. They're global in nature, and they drive a significant portion of the negative externalities that I think we're all focused on: greenhouse gas emissions, water, land use, and even social components. And so on a go forward, there's all kinds of activity in and around trying to address commodities, from shareholders to customer actions and so forth. And so we looked at them as a sort of an opportunity for digitization. So next slide. And at a very, very base level, so we're based here in Silicon Valley. There's a lot of kind of tech talk here about OT and IT and the gap and different things like that. But just at a very basic level, there's a gap between a lot of the innovation in and around operational technologies, cloud technologies, and some of the things that Tom talked about, and the sort of information infrastructure at large, markets and so forth. And so we also have found that in the commodities ecosystem within the industry itself, there's a culture of separation between production and market function. So within the organizations and the actual ecosystem itself, there's a very, very distinct separation culturally between sort of corporate management and markets and production at the base level. And Tom, if we go to the next slide. And so we created digital feedstock to sort of address that problem. So what digital feedstock is literally we're taking production data at this point of production, we structure that data, and we create a digital asset, and that immediately allows for new forms of optimization through forecasting and settlement and so forth. It reduces operating and capital costs by enabling analytics and process automation, and then it starts to lend itself towards the transformation of the markets themselves. So if we go to the next slide, Tom. So if we think of a digitized commodity at the very core, whether it's an MCF of natural gas or a bushel of corn, today those are largely classified in markets as on very vague terms with regards to their specifications, and they take many, many days to settle and have very little information about the impacts associated with the underlying asset. And what we're talking about here is when we create digital feedstock for natural gas or a bushel of corn, we can actually start to associate the attributes with the actual underlying asset. So if we move to the next slide. So, continuing on that point, if we think about a barrel of oil, there's a couple of things that get measured today, say gravity or an MCF of natural gas or bushel of corn. There may be one or two things today that are measured, but generally they're measured physically. So long after production, someone takes delivery and analyzes what has been delivered, and then there's a reconciliation and a settlement. In this case, what we're talking about is we're using data to identify multiple attributes associated with one underlying asset. So if we move to the next slide. And so within this is a data from oil and gas production. And so within that data, we can actually identify, quantify, and verify all kinds of attributes associated with that data. So in this case, we're talking about shale oil production, so it has natural gas and oil production. And we can identify all kinds of different attributes associated with the underlying assets of the barrel of oil and the MCF of gas. And then also, in the case of, say, landfill gas, we can create RINs or LCF credits and so forth. And Tom, if we go to the next. So, and with regards to blockchain, so as we take in and ingest production data, the first thing we do is we need a certification for the actual producer. Then we ingest the data through the Xpansiv platform. We register that data. We then apply any calculation that's associated for an attribute. So this could be a RIN, or it could be a low methane natural gas product, or a low water a bushel of corn, or ton of cotton. And so we apply that calculation, and what we end up with is a tokenized attribute associated with that underlying asset. And that can then be transacted. And if we go to the next slide. And I think the key thing here as we think about GHGMI is the vast majority of the attributes and the digital governance mechanisms that need to be applied in this new digital context do not exist. And so there is a significant need for the community to sort of start to drive the innovation in the governance space. And so Xpansiv, we've been around for about 10 months now. We generated first digital feedstock in May 2017. We have builds now in natural gas and renewable fuel sector, and we have multiple global firsts on the horizon with additional commodities and attributes. And so, and we worked along with some other folks to develop a pretty comprehensive report, which we expect to be published shortly, on the technological evolution of markets in a post-Paris world. So that's it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, Joe. I'm just going to set up to move to the next presenter. If Stefan Wiesen is on the line. Stefan, can you speak, please?
Can you hear me, Tom?
Loud and clear. Thank you. So, Stefan, I will manage your presentation. Please just let me know when to move to the next slide.
Okay, thank you. I assume that you can hear me well. Sorry, I could not link into the webinar, so I'm on the phone. I'm sure it's not as good in terms of voice. Thank you for organizing this. I'm Stefan Wiesen. I'm a member of the ILB, which is Institut Louis Bachelier in France. My background is in climate finance. And the ILB was, I think, interestingly funded just a year that blockchain was founded in 2008, and for basically the same reason, to try but with different objectives, to try to find new solutions to prevent the next crisis and to find alternative ways to finance in case of crisis. The ILB is a hub. It's a public hub for research, for academic and scientific research. We have about 350 researchers, about now 50 programs, and latest programs really are focused on cybersecurity, big data, and blockchains. We have 2 programs on blockchain. One is very dedicated to blockchain and finance with settlements, payments type of use case, and the one I'm with called blockchain and climate and transitions, very focused on sustainability issues. This particular initiative that we call climate change was started about 8 months ago now, and with the idea to use blockchain as a tool to add value to MRV process, and particularly, so I'm on slide 2, Tom, particularly to be to demonstrate the case for blockchain to be an optimal digital infrastructure to support a number of the Paris Agreement ambitions. And obviously, we were very focused on the need of countries in developing world, basically not the non-Annex 1 countries in the Kyoto mechanisms, which do not have any registries, which most of the time have a weak MRV process and methodologies, and that have come up with some with NDCs for the COP21, but most of the NDC are not replicables. They were basically worked on by consultants, and they are not basically the methodology was not consistent in our view, and we are basically want to demonstrate for these countries, and it makes a lot of sense to look at the blockchain to build integrity, consistency, traceability, and transparency in the MRV and NDC framework. So we started and quite paradoxally with a developed country, with France. We thought that it was a nice experiment to start with the French National Registry, and we've been working with Caisse Dépôt team, which basically manage the French carbon registry for both Kyoto and EU ETS schemes, and to replicate the functionalities of the French registry on the blockchain. We've done that last summer, and we've been a bit beyond that perspective. And what we've been doing also is to open the functionalities to what we think would be the expectations of the countries without registries. The idea, obviously, is very much to focus on the MRV side of the registry. We're not looking too much on the trading aspect. I think it's basically the 2 sides of the same coins, and we think that we believe that it takes a very solid and robust MRV process and registry to be able to come up with 1 NDC and 2 potential market mechanism, or at least more globally a carbon signal price that can translate into market mechanisms, or also into taxation. What we think. So we're not so much focused on basically resolving or trying to come up with solution on Article 6 of the COP, but probably more on Article 10 and even more on Article 13. I think all 3 aspects are quite important. And very much what we'd like is to come up, and I think I was hearing some very interesting points in the previous presentation about data. I think it's very important to make sure that the data that enters the blockchain are valid, are consistent, are reliable. And for that, I think we've been also looking upstream at the inventories, and started to work with inventories organizations about how to manage the data and to create a certification process into the blockchain to create a registry that is not only an accounting ledger, but that goes beyond that and can be used as a certification tool at the same time. Obviously, our ultimate goal is to deliver. I mean, it's a research program. I want to insist on that. We are a non-profit and we are a public organization. We are funded by some non-profit organization, but mainly public. So it's an open source, quite open research program. We are not intending to deliver tools as per se. If we do, we hope that some commercial organization will be able to develop these. But before that, before everything, we are a research organization, and our objective is to starting from the experiment to demonstrate and try to resolve a number of conjectures into the blockchain dilemma and challenges. What we think also, I think it's very important. I think the why is very important. Certainly, in the Paris Agreement, I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you the slide. I'm now on the slide number 4. Tom, but probably you can spend a little time on slide number 3 and move straight to slide number 4. We're coming with the idea that the central point of the Kyoto system was the registry, and that was very important into the Kyoto system, and that we are moving into the Paris Agreement paradigm, whereby the central point are the NDCs and no more the registry. But again, we want to make the point very clear that we believe that without MRV and registry, it's very complex to build a robust NDC mechanism. What we see, obviously, this is very much about being able to measure and to manage energy transition at a sovereign level. We are not very much looking at private organizations. Having said that, we have developed a project together with UNFCCC, the WWF, and 2 Degrees Investing, a project for Nazca, and the idea is basically to have kind of the same kind of approach on the Nazca platform, and trying to enhance the platform with the use of a blockchain infrastructure to create integrity, to standardize the way that 2 Degrees pathway are reporting into Nazca, and to create potential also to create incentive for companies or private organizations, non-state actors to report, and to create a standard so it's becoming more comparable for stakeholders, investors, for example, to look at the Nazca platform. With the very same objective, we believe that a strong registry and a strong MRV mechanism on the blockchain for example, these development countries is typically a tool that can create confidence and trust for external investors to invest in that countries, especially in the context of the new disclosure requirements for investors and for corporates. I'm thinking about the TCFD dynamic, which has been implemented by the FSB. This is typically something that is moving fast, and you know, in the next decade, I think it will become very important for countries to demonstrate through such a registry, and that they can basically show they can create confidence into their pathway and into their pathway to a low carbon economy. The following slide. Coming back to the pilot we've done with the French registry, and this is basically we've been using a Ethereum protocol for that. This is being translated into a demo, which will be hopefully a bit more tangible to see. We're trying to prove the added value of using a blockchain compared to a centralized registry. We have a few tools which are being developed right now, and the idea it's been working very well. The French state is very supportive of our work, and the idea is to potentially work also with another African state which doesn't have a registry, and come up together as with the French and that state as basically proof of concept, and to go a bit more actually on we're now moving into a pilot phase, which is a bit more than a proof of concept. In terms of research, obviously one of the big hurdle that we want to address is the blockchain energy footprint and carbon footprint, and how can we mitigate that? We believe we can either mitigate it by further research and cost-benefit analysis for countries that do not have a registry, but do not have also the institutional framework to all this registry. And for this type of country, probably mining doesn't it doesn't really care. I mean, then we have to look at the energy footprint of that. But I think it can be the overall balance can be positive, and we have to go basically for a kind of a life cycle analysis of the blockchain, in order to demonstrate that at the end of the day it can be positive for such countries. And obviously looking at researching all the existing and emerging protocol and architectures to see which one will be best adapted to the use of a registry or MRV mechanisms, and potentially also larger digital infrastructures to support the Paris Agreement. And at the very end of our thoughts, we have also the options, and we are looking with a few engineering schools in France on that, potentially why not to create a new protocol from scratch that will be fully dedicated and fully developed from scratch to precisely meet the expectation of the Paris Agreement as an infrastructure, really targeting Article 14 of the Paris Agreement. When obviously a lot of work is being done on double accounting and in data security, data encryptions, certification system, audit systems, and consensus systems. At the end of the day, the Paris Agreement is nothing else than a consensus. It makes it very strong, and the lack of consensus was the failure behind Kyoto. It's probably the strength of the Paris Agreement, but it's also probably its weakness. And I think it's interesting enough that to see a blockchain potentially is built on the same consensus with the same strengths and the same weakness, and that they can converge together to create a solid infrastructure, to support a few ambitions of the Paris Agreement. And I will stop there, and I will be happy to take some questions.
Thank you very much, Stéphane. We're going to hold the questions until after the final presentation, and just to try to keep us on time, thank you again, Stéphane, and we'll move quickly to our third presenter, Chalian. And Chalian, if you're able to join us.
Hi, hello. Hi, Tom. Hi, hello, everyone. I'm very glad to share our experience in China to use Fabric, one umbrella project of HyperLedger to architect a green finance system in China. Okay, please go to the next page. Thank you. Yeah, the mission of our company is try to build a future-oriented green economy system. It means that we would like to connect the green energy ecosystem with the green finance ecosystem by the blockchain, which blockchain actually provides a very good channel to directly so-called tokenize or so-called securitize those assets on the platform. Please go to the next page. Thank you. And you can see that our lab was founded in the year 2015. At that time, I was leading a program in the National Energy Administration in China at that time called the National Energy Internet Plan. And at that time, we found that blockchain may be the distributed ledger technology, may be the next on the layer structure, fundamental structure for the energy market as well as for the green finance market. So after the task force, after the project, we directly found the lab, and this lab was incorporated in the year 2016. And now we have about 45 staff in China, and the main mission or the main job for our platform, for our company, is to build a ledger in China, try to have those assets, especially those green assets, to become some kind of finance product. Okay, please go to the next page. Thank you. Okay, now you see that we directly go to the top layer of the green sustainable development system. It means that we are developing a ledger, and based on the ledger, some distributed applications are also deployed. But in a very fundamental layer, there is a very important layer, the social concept. Actually, you know, China has been the largest emissioner for about consistently for 9 years, and in China, especially those young middle-class people, they are very aware of the climate change and the pollution problems in China. So actually, it is the right time now to use some kind of new technology. Have those young and well-educated citizens in China to be included in the green finance system. So we are cooperating with several organizations and companies in China to incorporate both blockchain technology as well as the IoT technology to distribute the green electricity as well as to distribute those green finance products, for example, green bonds, as well as the green credit, the carbon credit to those young citizens in China. Okay, let's go to the next page. Okay. This is the architecture of our platform. You see the fundamental layer is the Internet of Things, of energy things, including various appliances, for example, the meter and the other sensors. Those meter sensors, they will directly collect those data from these most of the modules, wind turbines, and electric vehicles, and green houses. And we are cooperating with several major meter manufacturers in China, including the Voisin or Kelu and the Linyang. Those producers, they produce most of the meters in China. And by their platforms, we can collect the data from those appliances, and we are developing the middle layer for the distributed ledgers, and this is our product. And upon the ledgers, we are cooperating with the finance institutions in China to based on blockchain ledgers to develop distributed green ABSs and distributed carbon credits and green electricity applications. Okay, go to next page, please. Thank you. The attribute of the blockchain structure of our company is very important. This is a very so-called regulatory friendly. It is somehow some kind of different with those totally public chain. You know, those totally public chain had some kind of problem with the authority, especially in China, due to the special situation, due to the highly centralized government. So we have to make some compromise between wholly decentralized and practical platform. So we use this is why we use the fabric technology as kind of federation chain. It's including a very well-organized membership management mechanism. It's including several factors for those audience as well as the authority to have a whole view of the ledger. Okay, please go to the next page. Thank you. The first product based on the ledger is the carbon ledger. It actually is a carbon asset management system. This system can help those small and medium-sized green assets on the platform to directly be developed into some kind of carbon credit based on the current China national carbon trading system. And we are waiting for the argument debate of the national carbon trading market in this November. And China are going to combine all those 8 independent carbon markets in China into one centralized one. So we are working with the Shenzhen government to prepare for the national market. Okay, go to next page, thank you. This platform actually has several nodes. Those nodes including the Shenzhen emission exchanges and the Shanghai emission exchanges, and also there is more exchange in Sichuan provinces and other several green auditing companies in China, as well as one of the biggest green asset management company in China. Those key participants, they form a distributed ledger into on the Shenzhen emission exchange platform, and this platform can directly have to turn those data input into some kind of pre-registered carbon credits on the platform. And also, this is just a basic layer. Upon the basic layer, okay, please go to the next page. Okay. Upon the basic layer, we are trying to compare those methodologies into smart contracts. It will further reduce the time cost and the duration and the economic cost and time duration for the carbon credit development. Since currently the whole process for the carbon credit development in China is very, very expensive and lengthy. For example, for a very normal regular project to turn into some kind of credit, it will almost need more than 12 months. It means that you have to wait for 12 months to wait for your credit. So lots of small and medium projects, they decide to not go to the market, and just those big projects have the patience to go to the carbon credit market currently. So this is why we are going to use blockchain to help shorten the processes. According to our internal calculation and the pilot projects experiments, we found that just in the first stage, just to form a federated chain based on those rules, it can directly reduce the whole process by almost 30 to 40%. It depends on the project's nature. And also, very important, the fact that the government would like to incorporate with us is we can eliminate all kinds of malicious data manipulation during the whole processes. Since previously there are lots of data manipulation during the whole processes, and the final data report, the final auditing report, are not so trustable in terms of the data accuracy as well as the other very important issues inside the report. So blockchain can help those authorities and supervisors to reduce such kind of manipulation. Okay, please go to the next page. Okay, smart contract will be deployed afterwards. We are directly, we are gradually comparing those very complex, really complicated methods into the smart contract. But I think I always believe that not all of those methodologies can be turned into smart contracts, since a lot of methodologies are quite special in terms of the nature of the assets. So we at first stage we just turn those very simple methodologies into the smart contracts. For example, the methodologies of the large size photovoltaic power plant. It is very simple. So we currently have to compare the more than 12 methodologies into the smart contracts, almost including the wind plant, the large size wind plant, and large size solar power plant, and some methodologies like this. Okay, please go to that page. Okay. Okay, you see there are a lot of key challenges to be addressed in the carbon market. The standard is just one of this, and also the lack of transparency we are trying to address is also very important. But there are lots of another things we are not able to address, to deal with in the current stage. For example, most carbon credit funding goes to the emerging countries like China, Russia, and Brazil, and countries like this, not to the poorest. For example, the Zimbabwe or the Venezuela. And I think that those countries are the most vulnerable towards climate change. So we call upon that we peers, we companies, and our also other participants, we should be together to try to figure out a way to help those poorest countries in Africa continent and in other regions try to use blockchain technology to get the funding from those developed countries and also the international community. And the fourth thing is that carbon credit projects are very inflexible and risk averse. It means, for example, agriculture. Agriculture is the most vulnerable industry towards climate change, but most of those funding goes to those renewable sectors, not to the most vulnerable sectors. So it must be something wrong within the mechanism, within the current existing mechanism. So I also call upon our peers to directly to develop a very future-oriented, very practical new mechanism for the global carbon market to deal with this tough problem. Okay, next page, thank you. And beyond the carbon market, there are also a lot of finance sources, for example, public capital market and private capital market, also development banks. So please go to the next page, thank you. So beyond the carbon credit development, carbon credit platforms, we are currently developing another product based on Fabric also. This is green asset-based security cloud. We are directly cooperate with the Shenzhen Stock Exchange, which is the biggest stock exchange in China, just like New York Stock Exchange in the United States. This platform is aiming to have those green assets in China, especially those small and medium-sized assets in China, directly can be developed into the ABS, the asset-based securities. And all those asset-based securities can be very well rated and certificated by those raters and third-party professional agencies. And the purpose of this product is to have those underwriters, those asset owners, to be more to go to the public capital market more easily, and also to have those asset management companies and those banks to purchase a very were marked very marked also very not so expensive green assets. Those the platform can bridge the green asset market with the finance, especially the public finance market. We are going to launch this platform by the end of this year, namely this December, maybe the end of November, luckily. So this product will, I think, it will tremendously change the green, tremendously change the current way of green finance, of green assets, rising capital way. Okay, please go to the next page. Thank you. Beyond this, we see that there are a lot of problems in the green certification system in China. Since they are very fragmented, it means that a lot of different sectors inside the finance industries have different mechanisms for green certification. For example, the pension system, the security market, and the insurance market in China. All of those sectors have different certification systems. So we are cooperating with the regulatory entities in China, try to unify the different systems to make a very harmonized system for various kinds of green finance products. The purpose is also try to eliminate the unnecessary economic costs during the green finance product issuing management process. Okay, let's go to next page. Okay, so with also there's lots of key challenges to the green ETFs, also to the green bonds, all those green fixed income products. So we are trying to address this challenge one by one, but a lot of challenges cannot be addressed by our company alone. We also would like to cooperate with any other companies who are willing to cooperate with us to deal with these problems. And a lot of these problems cannot be dealt with only in China. It should be a very international cooperation to deal with such kind of very tough problems. Okay, let's go to the next page. Thank you. Okay. Beyond the finance products, we are also designing a third project. This project will be based on the Ethereum, not based on the Fabric, since it should be a very public platform, also very transparent platform for the tracking of the electricity generation and the consumption. Okay, you see that namely it is a coin. It is a green electricity coin. It helps those companies, it helps those energy producers can directly turn their electricity, green electricity into some kind of token. And those energy consumers, they can purchase this token, even they are not directly, physically directly consuming this green electricity from the producer. And the very fundamental, the very important participant in this ecosystem is the exchange. You see that in the bottom there is a section called the credit currency and so commodity service fiat currency exchange. This platform will help those green electricity coin producers can sell their coins in this exchange. So we are also cooperating with the emission exchange in Guangdong province in China to form, to design, to deploy this exchange. So okay, this is the third project. Okay, let's go to the next page. Thank you. So beyond green finance, beyond green finance, we also try to make a new ecosystem for those major giant appliance manufacturers in China, the biggest solar inverters, the biggest solar inverter manufacturers, the biggest solar module manufacturers, the biggest electrical metering companies in China, and other companies in the green energy system. We try to help this company to develop their own blockchain application, the decentralized application. I think that it is a very tough and time-consuming job, since you have to change their mindset. All those companies, they know little about what is decentralization, what is blockchain, but must someone to do this. So we are doing this kind of job in China to educate those manufacturers to know about the blockchain and the distributed ledger, as well as the token economy. Okay, please go to next page. Okay, this is several key partners of our companies. You can see various institutions inside for the energy, both energy side and blockchain side. Also some very important authorities and supervision entities inside. Okay, well, I think that we should try our best to involve those key players in the existing market to play this game also with us and always with us. Since although blockchain is so-called of revolutionized technology, but we also should make those existing giants the vast powers into this game. If we do not do this, they will be in the opposite rule. They will be some kind of old company or old guys who are sitting against of the decentralization revolution. So I think that we should, not our company, not only our company, but also all other blockchain companies should try to make a very continuously dialogue with those guys, with those entities, always. Okay, please go to next page. Okay, this is my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chalian, and thank you to all the presenters for providing an in-depth overview of blockchain initiatives around the globe. I know we don't have much time left for questions, but I will field one of the questions that appears to have been made fairly often from participants. Stéphane, if you're still on the line, in your presentation, you made note of the energy consumption of blockchain applications, and I wonder if you could talk a bit more about the research, the size of the issue, the potential solutions to address the high energy consumption of blockchain and its associated emissions.
Sure, Tom. I mean, it's early stage, but we've actually been working on that with INRIA, which is a research school for technologies, and they have really in-depth knowledge and data on the issue. If we're taking the proxy of Bitcoins, we're now talking about, and I know there are some really different hypotheses which are circulating to the market, but really, so we're talking about the energy footprint equivalent to a country like Denmark. So it's not minimum. It's basically another country on the map, and obviously it's one issue which makes blockchain really, controversial in the context of the Paris Agreement, and it's a question that we face every time that we are pitching the idea. So it's maybe not, the most controversial issues. There are more controversial issues, but with the blockchain, but it's a critical issue in the scope of climate change. And the carbon intensity, of course, behind the energy footprint is also quite bad because of the Chinese mining, obviously. So we know there are two ways to address that. Obviously, we are waiting for at least for the alternative protocols such as Ethereum to come up with a proof of stake, and there will be at some stage a new fork into Ethereum to move into this proof of stakes. And I believe in the long run that the two systems will live independently on Ethereum. So on one side on the proof of work that will continue, on one side on the proof of stake with new mechanisms, and we've seen a number of new emerging protocols, which I think are very interesting from that perspective. I mean, we can name Tezos, which beyond the legal problems they're facing, I think it's very interesting the way that governance is achieved. And I think one way we have to deal with that is basically look very carefully at how the negotiators within the COP23 and basically will structure the new, will implement and structure the new tools for the implementation of the Paris Agreement, and basically reflect that. We are not wanting to impose anything, but we have to find a rules of consensus, which basically is, steps away from mining, or potentially use mining with draw mechanisms to reduce the competitions on mining. But certainly, I think the most important point is to look at a governance structure that can reflect the negotiations and exactly reflects the will and the wish of the parties. And I think that's extremely important. So obviously, a short answer to your question is to move away from mining. But as I said before, it's not that simple. I think for a number of states, in a weak institutional environment, we believe that a good, consistent cost-benefit analysis can demonstrate that still it's a valid instrument in the lack of any institutional framework to support new tools such as a registry, such as a cadastre, and so on for this kind of environment. And even if there is negative externalities coming from the blockchain, overall the balance can be positive. So it really depends on the context, on the institutional context, and the energy context as well. Of course, mining in Iceland is not so much of a problem as in China, as you know.
Thank you very much, Stéphane, for that informative response. And I agree, there is a lot of work being done to address the energy uses of blockchain, particularly as it scales across so many applications. I want to say thanks again to all of our speakers and also to our participants for joining us today for this webinar. GHGMI is going to continue to be involved in watching the evolution of blockchain for climate actions and carbon markets. In particular, myself co-leading with IETA a new project for next generation governance for blockchain in climate. We'll be speaking about that at COP23. There's quite a few meetings at COP, the next COP coming up in a couple of weeks related to blockchain. I know many of us will be there. I think all the speakers will also be there, and hopefully we'll have some great information to share more broadly following that meeting. Thanks again, everyone, and please stay in touch. Bye-bye.